Next item on our agenda is fiscal year 2017 operating override information update. Includes department manager perspective on the impact if the overrides were to fail, including the Middleton Elementary School, the police, the fire, public works, and the Recreation Commission. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. As you know, we have a big override question that's going to be coming before the voters, both the town meeting and at the election the following week. And we're trying to do as much outreach as we can to explain to voters why we need this override and, more importantly, what services would need to be cut if this does not pass.
So we asked the departments to come in and essentially answer any questions the board has or discuss in general or specific terms what the, as you said, Madam Chair, what the effects of the override are for these departments. As we went through the operating budget and realized that we didn't have sufficient revenue to fund our services, we had to make some difficult choices in terms of what would be on the override and what would not. And so we've laid that out. It's in Article 5 of the warrant. Article 4 is the omnibus budget, roughly a $32 million budget. Article 5 is the what we've been referring to as the override article. That is something that would require both town meeting approval and approval at the ballot. And the way that breaks out is $155,000 in personal services from the school department, $60,000 in personal services at the police department. Related to that, police department cut a $20,000 reduction in health insurance. That's related to the position that would remain vacant. $65,000 in personal services in the fire department, $11,000 in personal services in public works, $19,000 in capital outlay at public works, and then a cut of $20,000 in total at recreation, $17,500 in personal services, and $2,500 in services and supplies. So the total of Article 5, the total value or the total shortfall in the budget, if you want to look at it that way, is $350,000. And then I don't know if you want to get into the override talk now or hear from the department heads first and then talk about the override.
Well, yeah, I think it would make more sense, for the viewers if we set the stages as to why we have a problem, the size of the problem, our three-pronged strategy for dealing with it, not just for this year but for the 2 or 3 years down the road. What it would mean in terms of impact on services for these departments for this year, and also recognize that if the strategy is not able to be implemented in full, then there will be further cuts in subsequent years that could affect these same departments again or other departments, and finally closing with what the impact is on an average taxpayer. So I can proceed with setting the stage. It started, last year. There were overrides on the ballot for Masco and Essex Tech, totaling about $405,000. The Middleton voters rejected those overrides. Unfortunately, the other communities in those districts approved the higher amounts, so that Middleton is legally obligated to pay that $405,000 for this year and going forward. The next part of the problem is our increasing enrollment at Essex Tech. 2 years ago, when the new campus, was opened, we have begun to have, 16 and 15 kids in each grade level. At the upper grade levels, we'll have one senior, 4 juniors. So as those 5 students, graduate, they will be replaced by 15 or 16 in each grade level. So we'll be picking up about 27 students over the next 2 years. That's kind of a reasonable assumption. And at today's cost, those students would cost Middleton $470,000. So you take the $405 that we still have to pay, the $470 that we will likely have to pay in the next couple of years, we're up to $805,000 problem that we have to, create a solution for. That would mean that we not keep going back to taxpayers, for more Band-Aids. So there's 3 prongs to the strategy. One, we've implemented already by reviewing all of the fees that are charged, by the town, whether they're, license fees, building permit fees, all fees, and adjusted those that were below the area median. And we anticipate about $100,000 from that source. We're asking, the town to approve the local option meals tax, which could add $200,000 of revenue. So that's $300,000 to go toward the $875,000 problem. The remainder is, an override. We've put a $690,000 override on the warrant and the ballot, even though for next year we only need $350,000. And the reason for that is those increasing costs because of the number of students at Essex Tech. I don't think anyone wants to be faced with an override this year and another one next year or the year after that. And this is an attempt to solve that funding gap for that period of time. Now, other costs will also increase, but it is reasonable to expect that those will be able to be managed as they have in the past within the confines of Prop 2.5. So now, if all that 3 prongs of the strategy are implemented, $990,000 of revenue could be coming into the town, $100 from fees, $200 from local meals tax, $690 from the override, and a shortfall of $875. There is some leeway there because the revenue may be less and the expenses may be more. So that's the background of the $350,000 that was identified in Article 5. And I think we would all appreciate hearing from the departments what it means for them and for the level of service that they could provide to the residents of Middleton, so that people can make an informed decision as to, how to cast their vote on these issues.
Thank you. That's a very concise summary. I tell you, I'm so glad that we have him because he really is able to really summarize everything and bring it down to a layman's term, because this can get very, very confusing. So I know that a number of the department heads are here. I would be willing to entertain anyone who would like to make a comment.
I can start.
Go ahead,
Can I
Tasha.
do it from here? Or do I have to stand?
No, go right ahead.
Because I'm taller than that.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, so I'm Tasha Cooper, Chair of School Committee. So I think people know that we failed our override last year. So we cut $284,000 out of our budget from last year, which hurt. This year, again, costs have been rising. A lot of out-of-district special education tuition costs have risen. And we have done everything that we can to scrub that budget as clean as possible from buying less pencils to cutting classrooms where we can. If this doesn't pass, we will be down another $155,000. As it stands now, I would be hesitant to say that we're providing a level service as we have in past years. I say that because we are at a disadvantage by not offering a STEM program that the other two towns have, that they're building a huge lab up at Masco, doing tons of fundraising for. So, and the other towns have something, and we have yet to be able to bring it in because we can't. We have our classes at a level that historically we are kind of at a max, and we're afraid a little bit about what's going to happen because there's several months of which students can be moving into town, which we've seen happen in other towns, we've seen happen in our town. So we are not all that comfortable with the budget as it is, but it stands. I just can't say that it's 100% level services to last year. If the override does not pass, it will be below the services that we've provided to our students in the past. I say this because what will likely happen is that we will lose 2 sections, which means that even if we didn't get another student in from now until September, we're going to have we're going to have more kids per class than we've had in 20 years. And there are some grades specifically that have some high needs that really need the separation that they have now. All that does is it stresses our special ed system, because kids who are on the cusp of needing it might now need it. So we're obviously very concerned and in much need to pass this override. Does that give a good little overview as to where we're coming from?
It does, and I think also, as Costa stated, the overrides did not pass last year, so even though we were mandated to fund fully Essex Tech and Masco, Middleton Elementary were not. So they had to make those cuts already, so you've already,
We've already cut.
You've already.
And I think that's a really important point to continue to stress here, is that, the beauty of a regional school district is the way to coordinate and save some funds at times in smaller communities. Sometimes the problem with a regional school district is we're beholden to the majority vote. So when the school committee, even though we have representatives from Middleton in the school committee, when the school committee at Masco or Essex Tech, because we have a representative from Middleton that serves on the Essex Tech board, their vote is only a certain size vote. And ultimately, when those communities' town meetings or city councils, in the case of the cities in the Essex Tech district, when they approve a budget and a majority approves it, we own it. I think hopefully this will be a message that will be sent to the communities in these districts of the stress that we're under, and we understand that other towns have been in stress in other years within the budget. But the reality is Essex Tech and Masco were really held harmless from the override failure last year, but I'd say disproportionately came out of the hide of the Middleton Elementary. And, for those that are home that aren't here at this meeting, but even for those that are here, I think it's important to note that the budget that we're coming up with, while we're asking for the override, we're not, this budget isn't what we all hoped it would be. I mean, this budget is pretty bare bones, not just on the elementary side, but quite honestly on the non-school side of the town as well. So we made some drastic cuts in some areas, things that our chiefs wanted to address, we weren't able to address. The same goes with Public Works and others. So, I think it's important to note that, while we can be the masters of our own destiny within the elementary schools and within the municipal side of government, we're really not the masters of our own destiny in a regional school district. And while voters may think, well, we don't have to pass an override and the Masco budget's going to get funded anyway. That's great, but it's come out of the hide of the other departments, and I would say, again, disproportionately out of the hide of the elementary school.
Totally agree with that. Another thing I'd like to add when Costa was talking about the three-pronged approach to solving this problem this year, I think another 0.25% of that a couple times over is a couple initiatives that we're hoping to pass this year with the stabilization fund and the
special education reserve fund.
In hopes that we can start evening out the up and down falls of special education costs. So for several years, we've been in a good situation where it hasn't been rising. But all it takes is, a few students to move into town with special needs that we are here to address, and the numbers spike. And there's nothing that we can do about it, and the money that we get from the government to support that barely does anything.
And that's a really important note. And, I know Steve's been actively involved in this discussion, as has Andy and Ryan and our CFO. And, I think we are on the cusp of being able to provide I think, a very innovative and forward-thinking way of taking the spikes and the valleys out of that, what seems to rise in a cyclical process, and it always seems to come at the worst time.
Well, right.
And I think and what that will do is help the elementary school focus on the issues that always seem to get pushed aside when the spike comes, and you try to make up when the valley comes. And I think that'll go a long way. Realizing that in the end, it's all tax dollars that are paying it, but it's so you're not beholden by the spikes and valleys that.
Exactly.
That
I'm
this
really
year you're
excited that
dealing
we're
with.
doing it this year. I think it couldn't have come at a better time. I wish it had come back 3 years ago when we didn't need it, but it's now. And, the thing that happens is when we have students that move into our town that have these high needs, they're not one-year students. Depending on when they come in or when these needs are found, they could be there for 6 years. Or they could be there for 3 years, whatever. So it's not just a short situation that this year it's the high one and next year it's going to be really low, unless everybody graduates. And then we move it on to Masco.
It's a different problem.
It's somebody else's. But, so anyway, that's what we're doing. We're, just to let you know, as a joint task force, we're trying to get the word out. We are in the process right now of drafting letters to the newspaper, getting on social media, and making calls, texts, emails. So the campaign, I would say, by the end of this week should be in full force from our perspective. But we also want to work with the towns, like the other department people, because I don't want this to be about the schools.
And it's not just about the
It's
schools.
not. It's the town. And I would like to come at it as we are all in this together. Like, let's not blame the schools. This is our town. This is our community that everybody moved here because they like it. And they stay here because they like it. It's a good town. So I would like to work with the people surrounding me right now in terms of, getting this, that we're all on the same page.
I agree. And back to the schools, well, if this override fails, there's a $155,000 additional hit that'll come to the elementary schools.
Yes.
Again, failure or non-failure of the override, Masco and Essex Tech are fully funded. We have no choice. Well, we'll see what the towns in those communities do to the budget. I fully expect that the majority of them will fulfill that. Quite honestly, we will walk into town meeting in Middleton with Topsfield's town meeting completed, and Boxford's, I think, is the same evening. So we will have a pretty good idea of where the passage will be. But, as it relates to the $155,000, I see in the notes that Costa has, and we've talked about this at length, that this isn't going to be $155,000 in cuts in additional pencils and textbooks and other equipment. This is going to
This
be
is the big stuff.
This is going to be people.
This is going to make us bleed. I mean, we are not going to be feeling good.
No, absolutely.
There will be tears.
But I think it's important to state that. Not, this is a scenario none of us wanted to be in, but, and we're going to be talking about that as we talk about the fire department, as we talk about the police department, as we talk about the DPW. These are going to be real cuts in positions that are going to mean that a level of service that we get today will not be there on July 1st.
Well, and I think it's really important that people come out and vote, because I don't feel that people didn't want the override last time. I just feel like they failed to get out and vote. And so that will be our biggest mission is, well, one, to obviously educate why we're doing this, but more importantly, get both, everybody who's over 18 or can vote out there and voting.
Chief Chris, what would this mean for the fire department and the level of service that you could provide to the community?
I sit down?
Sure.
Good evening.
And thank you for allowing me a few minutes to speak on this. What we can say in terms of the impacts on the fire department, it will be significant. The $65,000 that's indicated in Article 5 represents a 4% cut in my budget. And similar to what we're dealing with in the school, that is significant in terms of personnel. What will happen is that we will lose a full-time equivalent position, which basically takes our staff strength from 4 down to 3 for 70 hours out of the week. And, you know, we look at this and we say, well, it might not be a big deal, but it is, because we're a department that's getting busier and busier. Just the difference between calendar year 14 and calendar year 15, there was an increase in 115 ambulance transports, and overall an increase of 176 incidents. That's just over that 2-year period. We're experiencing tremendous growth, as we've seen. We know that we protect well over 9,000 residents. We protect 1,300 prisoners. We take care of, over $1.7 billion in value in this community. And, you know, what that all equates to, and I'll segue into this, is the issues with traffic. And that's why it's so significant in our staff reductions, because we rely more on people coming in off duty to supplement our response. If we look at an NFPA standard, NFPA 1720 is a standard relative to personnel deployment and response times to fires and medical emergencies. And this is the standard that applies to communities with career or paid firefighters. And what it says in this particular standard, it calls for 4 people, either on one vehicle or multiple vehicles, to arrive at a fire scene within 5 minutes, 90% of the time. And that could be in, like I said, either one vehicle or multiple vehicles. But if we do that with one vehicle and 3 firefighters, it's virtually impossible, due to the traffic that we deal with in this community, to get there within that 5-minute time frame. It also goes on to say that it calls for 14 or 15 people to arrive at a full alarm assignment within 9 minutes, 90% of the time. So take that fire in the outskirts of Middleton, put the traffic into the equation, trying to get these off-duty firefighters in from home to man the apparatus to get to this fire. There's no way we can get to that 9 minutes. Another effect, taking from 4 firefighters to 3, which are trained as paramedics as well, is that I'm sure we'll see a decrease in our ambulance revenues, because the ability for us sometimes to man the second ambulance will not take place, which will require us to call mutual aid. We can look at the FY17 budget. We can see what impact does that have. Well, for FY17, we're contributing $384,000 on the revenue side of this operating budget, plus another $255,000 on the warrant article for a new ambulance out of the ambulance fund. I mean, I can't really predict the decreases in ambulance revenue, but I'm sure that will be something that we will see if the override does fail. All I can say is, again, I'm looking forward to working with the police, with the DPW, with the schools, to get the message out that these cuts are real, they're serious, and they will affect all of our operations. I would hope that if anyone that is watching wants to come and talk to me or call me, please call, and I will sit down, I will talk with anyone, I will meet with any group to talk about the actual impacts that this has. I've been fire chief here almost 10 years. I've been here 36 years on this department, and this is a tough one for us all to grasp. We're working harder than we ever have, just like the school department's working harder than they ever have because of the increase in enrollments, the police department with the increase in activity, the DPW with the increase in road miles and all the other responsibilities we all have. All we ask is that the residents and the voters consider this override to help us at least maintain the level of services that we can currently provide.
On your ambulance runs, do you have any statistics on the demographics of the people that you are helping? For instance, are there people over 60, a greater portion of your ambulance runs, or younger than 12?
Right. We typically break our statistics down based upon chief complaint. Are we able to pull that out, age
age-wise? I mean, that is something that we can provide.
Because, this, if you are in the demographic that is serviced more by the ambulance runs, I think you would be more concerned about the decreases in response time and ability to respond, just because you're more likely to be the one that actually needs that service.
Right, and that's it too. And just for instance, yesterday, we had 3 incidents within a 10-minute period. The on-duty crew was at an ambulance call. They were able to split up and take a smoke investigation. And then when that also, while these 2 incidents were taking place, we also had a call for a medical emergency at a local business. And what we found out was that when I arrived with one other firefighter, because we were spread thin, this person was experiencing a seizure, and we were told that this person was seizing for 14 minutes, and we had to wait for a mutual aid ambulance to arrive.
So I think a telling part of what you've explained to us tonight is a 4% cut, which, I think an important theme of the message here is what $155,000 on top of the cuts that you've already made at the schools, what a 4% cut to the fire department is a serious cut, and you're explaining that it's going to mean personnel. And what this proves to me, and I think for the folks at home, the folks here in the room, is that overall our department budgets are pretty lean. We came into this year, last year, very lean. In some cases, people may think, well, I can cut 4% out of my budget at home, or I can cut 4% here or there, and it won't be dramatic. The reality is the bulk of the services we provide are provided by the men and women in our department, and a 4% cut comes down to a level of service, because there's not a lot of, don't take this term the wrong way, there's not a lot of fluff or reserve within that. At the same time, I don't want anybody to think that, well, why can't we just fund this 4% out of our reserves? The reality is this is an operational function. Well, we have some cash reserves that we usually use for a pay-as-you-go in our capital needs issues. And other realities, if we put that cash that we have in reserves, our rainy day fund and other issues, if we put that into funding these 4% cut to your budget, or $155,000 cut to the schools, or $60,000 to the police department, Chief DG's department. If we funded that through our cash reserves, the reality is we are right where we are the next year, because our tax base isn't going to be able to absorb the next year's budget needs. At the same time, we removed our level of rainy day, cash reserves. But I think it's a very telling point that a 4% cut to the fire department is a cut that means a level of service. This isn't reducing the, amount of equipment and materials that you can buy that would solve the problem, and it won't. And I think that proves that for a long period of time, there's been a well-run town taking into effect the ability to pay. But we are at the point now where, because of budgets that are outside of our control, as I said, Essex Tech and Masco, where we really have no control over those budgets. The number they give us is the number we own. That the only budgets that we have control over, the masters of our own domain, come down to these. So, and I appreciate it, and I think, well, this is a sobering discussion to have, whether it's schools, fire, and I know we'll have the police discussion shortly. I think it's proof that we are looking at this holistically. We looked across the entire town, including other departments, of where potential cuts could come should the override fail. But we realized that in any cut we make, because our department budgets are very lean, that it's going to mean real cuts with real service reduction. And I know that if that does come to play, and hopefully it does, and I know that, the members of your department and your leadership and Captain and others will, do what you have and do with what you do, as you did exactly in that example that you gave yesterday. Might not have been the optimal response, but it's the response you had.
Yeah, we do the best we can.
Thank you for your input, as always. Chief, would you like to follow that?
Good evening.
Hi, Chief.
Again, I'd like to say, as the fire chief did, thank you for having us, to voice our concerns. As you know, and Frank said it, well, we're in a position nowadays where services are needed more than they ever have been in this town, and we're going backwards instead of moving forward. $60,000 to someone's budget in the business field is not a lot of money. But for us, when you're running, and Brian said it great, we have no fluff. I have a $1.5 million budget. $1.3 million is personal services. So $200,000, we run a business, and the police department is a business, with $200,000. The rest is personnel. These cuts, some people say, well, you're going to lose something you didn't have. Well, that's not necessarily true. When we decided to look for a new full-time officer, and when Ira was here, we tried to think outside the box. So what we did was we took some money out of our part-time funds to fund the full-time position, $30,000. So now, with the $60,000, I lose half of the full-time position, but also half of my budget that I had last year for my part-time position. As it stands right now, I have $7,600 left in my part-time budget. I will find the money to fund the rest of the year through the money that I had for the $30,000 for this full-time employee that I was supposed to have hired 6 months ago. So we will make it this year. Next year, it's going to be a whole different ballgame. The new position was going to be a 4 and 2. It was going to be 4 evening shifts. Right now, those evening shifts are being filled by reserves. As you know, we're still a man down through some litigation issues that we've been having, so we're still down a person. Federal standards say, and this is the best I could find, was 2003, we should have 2.2 police officers per 1,000 residents. So as it stands now, back in 2003, we should have had 20 police officers. We're at 13, where we've been for many, many years. We haven't increased that. We need sufficient number of police officers to be deployed at any one time to maintain the safety and provide adequate levels of protection to the public. My main concern is the officer safety. Right now, we run 3 officers on every shift. I don't know if we're going to be able to continue that. We're getting busier and busier. What happens when you reduce your services? You become a reactive police department instead of a proactive police department. You only handle calls. You can't get out there, do community policing. You can't do all the extras that we've been doing for many years, and that's going to hurt. You know, I don't know where all our extra money's going to come from for certain programs in the coming years. It's very depressing at this point of my career. After 32 years of service, we're going backwards instead of moving forwards. As I said before, my main concern is the officer safety. Every day I wear a uniform to work because I'll get out there and help if I have to. There's many police chiefs who wear suits and ties and never get their hands dirty. That's not the way Milton's operated. But I'm finding myself more and more getting out, directing traffic, helping out. I don't care. I have no problem doing it. But what's going to happen when the next cut comes or the next cut comes? It's, we need to make sure that everybody in this room works together to try to get this passed. I'm more concerned about keeping the levels that I have now, not so much the new person. If the new person doesn't come right now, we could deal with that. But I'm trying to maintain the levels that we have, and it's becoming more and more difficult to do. So I'll take any questions, comments, concerns, and I'll do everything I can to help everybody else to get the message out.
So, I mean, when you mentioned about, some the community policing and the other, things like, the DARE officer and things like that, if you're not able to do that, we'll probably end up in a situation that we need even more police, because those programs sort of eliminate problems before they happen, or help control them or identify them. So, if we don't have the resources to do those things, we're creating more problems and therefore needing more resources on the other hand.
Right. I mean, all you have to do is watch morning, evening, or nightly news, and you'll see what's going on in the world. Police shootings are up. Deaths are up by opiates. It's taxing the ambulance service, our offices. We get one accident on 114. That's 2 officers tied up for over an hour or more. And that, if there's only 2 officers working, there's no one to answer the other calls. We had an arrest this afternoon. We had an arrest last night. We had an arrest yesterday afternoon. I mean, it's getting busier and busier, and it's taking those officers off the street to do the booking. Today was a female, so you have to have two police officers, 2 male police officers. If you don't have a female working, you can't leave them alone. So that takes another toll on the department. So there's just no one to answer the calls. And, I hate to backlog calls if I don't have to, but sometimes it's a necessity.
And the proactive work you do, whether it's the DARE program in the elementary schools or the resource officer that is not full-time but spends some of their time over at Masco, I mean, those are investments that we get back in many ways. And, as we talk about, taking $60,000 out of your budget, but also reducing your full-time equivalent police officers down by 1, I mean, those are going to come at the expense of not just responding, but, as you said, being proactive. The DARE program, a resource officer at Masco, areas that we're going to have to start to prioritize, which are not the great priorities to be making.
Thank you so much for your input. It's very important for people to understand that these cuts, how they're going to affect each and every department and each and every resident in the town.
Madam Chair, the Chairman of the Recreation Commission is here, Kevin Noyes.
Yes.
Bob Labossiere is not here tonight. He was unavailable tonight, but we can, between Ryan and I, we can talk about some of those things if you want to.
Sure. Kevin, would you like to
Kevin first.
come up and sit down? Thank you for coming.
Hi, Kevin.
Absolutely. We prepare stuff. So I am. I think I'm in a different circumstance compared to the other people here. Yes, we're being cut. Over 50% of our budget is being cut. We have run a wonderful summer program for many, many, many years. Probably in its highlight, we had up to 500 kids that would register for it. Probably now we're in the 300 to 400 range. And probably about 100 kids come to that program every single day. And that is staffed with a director, 2 assistant directors, and last year we had 10 park counselors. So you're looking at 120 hours per person per summer. This coming summer would be a little shorter because of where 4th of July falls. We always do usually the Monday after 4th of July. It's a Monday this year, so we decided to put it to that Wednesday. So we're looking at 112 hours. It's a free program. It's something that people love, that people use. My kids went through it. I think everyone's kids here have gone through the program. Janet Balicki has been there forever. Last year we did interviews of our candidates. Every single kid said the same thing. I love those melting. They do this craft where they melt things, and oh my God, you'd ask every counselor, what was your favorite thing? Oh, the melting thing. We're like, all right, okay. It's a really great program. It's Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 12:30. It's held at Howe Manning. So what I tried to do is break it down exactly what it costs. If you look at our salaries alone for that, as I mentioned, it's a little over $17,000. It's a free program. So what we did is we did some research and we looked at other towns around. In your materials, you'll see some examples that I have. I didn't include Danvers. Danvers is a free program. Danvers is probably where we would aspire to be because of the stuff that they offer. They are free. They have numerous locations. We have one. They charge for field trips. They have two different programs or levels of field trips, $89 and $139. Various things that you get from it. We don't do field trips. We do the day at Howe Manning, and we have kids that do great things with our kids that are in their care. So what I did is I provided you a layout of Andover, Boxford, Peabody, and Topsfield, so you could see the varying degrees of hours, the varying degrees of costs, services that they provide. I think that in our standpoint, if we did some cuts to try to resurrect this program and we charged a fee, it could be something we could do. Is it ideal? No, of course it's not. Of course it's not. There are people probably out there that are hearing all of these proposals, et cetera, and we're low man on the totem pole, and I understand that. But if we go through the overrides, I have a feeling at some point in time, you've got to come back to us again. I have a feeling that, it's a free program. So we kind of thought about numbers and things that we could do. The first thing we'd probably do would be cut 2 park counselors, and that would save us a little over $2,200 off of that $17,500 that we're trying to get just from salaries alone. Then we said, okay, what could we do? What would be logical to charge if we were going to charge? We've talked about charging for years and years and years. We've never done it. We thought that we would do that for the purpose of doing field trips, et cetera. Now it's more of a necessity that we have to do it. So we're contemplating maybe $100 per kid. We would have to make an assumption that we get 150 people to pay for or 150 kids to be paid for, to raise the $15,000 just to cover our services. And that's if everyone decided that they wanted that. So what does that equate out to? Less than $1 per hour, but still $100 is $100. Not everyone can afford that, and if we're tacking that on to increasing their tax bill, now you're looking at a couple of hits for these people. So we are looking at it. We will seriously look at it. Would we be able to try to do it if everything lined up perfectly, like what you guys are going through? Yeah, maybe we could. We'd also have to think about how we're going to pay for the expenses for those, because we usually do about $2,500 in expenses for all the crafts, those melty things that the kids do. You think it's funny. It's what they do. I'm telling you. All the kids talked about it, so we would have to figure out that. Or there are things that we could cut to compensate for that. We could get rid of the holiday party that we have every year around Christmas time. So there are things that if we have to make those choices, we'll make those choices. We would hope that things would pass accordingly, but we understand. Of the people presenting, we understand. So.
Well, I can tell you over the years, when my kids were younger, I really looked forward to the holiday parties, the rep program. It just offers you even just a few hours in the morning of some alone time, or just to run an errand, or go food shopping where you don't have to bring them with you, and so it's a great service, and the kids love it.
They love it.
They get out, they get some exercise, they get to see other kids, and there's a lot of on a day-to-day basis, there's a lot of kids that don't get that.
Right. Well, it was interesting. We had someone email me probably about a month ago. She said, "So, would you ever consider doing a full-time park program?" Because they're looking for to replace camps at a cost-effective status. And I was going to bring it up at our rec meeting, but I thought, what was presented to us was a little bit more important at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. That program is part of why people love Middleton.
Right.
It's
exactly.
the camaraderie, the friendships that are built through that. It's something that's, it's hard to put a dollar figure on it, but it's very important.
Right. And everyone knows Janet Balicki. And us as parents appreciate her being there. Her daughter is also involved. Abby is involved. We love her as well. She does a great job. And then we have, 8 to 10 counselors that we have interviewed, talked to, got a feeling for, really made sure that whoever these kids are put in the care of are getting a great day of fun. Because, like I said, all of our children have gone through this. All of our kids have great memories of this program.
And I have a bunch of those melty things that were made for me over the years.
Was it iron?
That I still have.
Yep. Yep, and you see the kids put them on their backpacks. I don't know. I don't remember my kids doing the melty things, but interviews, that's all they said.
They're important.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And
Absolutely.
we had a great time at the Red Sox game. I'm sorry you weren't there and missed it, but
Yeah.
beautiful day in the bleachers in,
Yep.
in the sun. So
Yep. New York trip is up next, May 14th.
excellent.
So
All right.
that'll be coming out again.
Great. Thank you
you.
very much. Thank you for all you do. You said DPW is not here, but we had down here as a potential service that would need to be cut, would be maintaining some summer help, and also the dirt road grading that we do in town, which, again, went down the bumpy road at Lake Street, almost lost my tire again. It's pretty bumpy, needs to be graded. And, those are important things, too. You say, oh, it's just a dirt road, but for residents that, want to get to their homes or surpass, go around the traffic, et cetera, you don't want to blow a tire going down that.
Well, on the summer help elimination, it's a smaller dollar amount, but, I've said this how many budget cycles, and I'll say it again this cycle. Our town is a little bit bigger than it was in the early 70s. We have a lot more roads than we have in the early 70s. We have less DPW employees than we had in the early 1970s. Never mind that we have more parks and field space than we had during that time. And the summer employees go a long way towards Bob and his team being able to deal with a lot of the maintenance backlog that the men of the department can't get to. Because, again, what I was saying when Chief Twist was sitting here is that we run a lean operation in Middleton, and DPW is a perfect example of that. While I think we've done well by equipment for all of these departments, the reality is the elimination of summer help is going to have an effect. It's going to have an effect on fields being mowed. It's going to have an effect on a lot of the maintenance work that always gets deferred until the summertime when we have high school and college students that are coming in. And while we don't pay them a lot, I know on the other side that summer employment for a lot of these students is the way that they're saving for the costs that they're going to have going off to college. But I think the bigger effect at DPW is, while $35,000 does not sound like a lot of money, that is, again, another example of a percent hit to one of our departments that may not be viewed as a life and safety issue, but it is going to have a long-term effect on, for the rest of that fiscal year, of what we've become accustomed to within the lean budgets that we've been operating. I don't know what that would mean that would mean how many positions in the summer?
We'll leave it to two.
Yeah, Bob was looking at two, but also too, there's a backfilling for vacation time that our full-time employees are taking. But you're absolutely right, Brian. It is a reduction service.
Yeah, and many of our full-timers don't take vacation during the winter months because they're willing and able to be available when the snow flies. Not this winter, knock on wood, was a good winter, but the winter before, the employees of the department worked yeoman hours and forgave vacations that they finally took with their families when we had summer employees that could backfill. And those are just yet another effect that's going to have on that department.
And, Madam Chair, just to talk briefly about the in terms of process and then the scope of the override. There's often a sort of cynical thought that the cuts that are threatened are not going to actually be realized. But the way that the warrant is structured this year, there is no money. This $350,000 is not in the budget. So these things, we don't have. Even if we wanted to, after the fact, if the override failed, restore the funding for any of these departments, there's just not an appropriation there. There's no legal way for us to do that without.
We would have to go back to
voters.
town meeting and cut elsewhere to fund
Exactly.
here, and
Exactly.
we'd be taking it from the left pocket and putting it in the right.
And then in terms of the impact of the override itself will add about 19 cents to the tax rate. So for the average house at $527,000. The tax impact of that is about $103 in fiscal year 17. So, it's a tough situation that we find ourselves in. I think I think we've developed a prudent approach to it, and I credit to the board and the finance committee and the members of the working group that have met a few times to work on this, and it's not a good situation to be in. I think we've been prudent in our reductions, in the targeted reductions that we've identified. It's not going to be easy on the departments, but hopefully we can make the compelling case that it is a worthwhile investment in the community.
And I think there's just one other message to add to this. I think taxpayers in this town have been generous when the need has been explained and has risen to the point of realization. And I give a perfect example of the Hal Manning School. It took some time for passage on that, but when it passed, I think even some of those that were pretty strongly opposed to it realized the vision of what the new school meant to the town, meant to the education program, but also just meant we were, as a town, investing in our facilities. And voters and taxpayers opened their wallets and made that investment. I think, well, this isn't an investment in a facility. This is really an investment in the level of service that this town has come to expect. But also it's an investment that I think people need to understand that we as this board, the school committee as well, and the finance committee, and the recreation commission, they operate in such a way that we have historically always realized that the investment in the taxpayers' dollars, we take very good care of, and we make sure that our budgets are in line with what people can pay. I think that's why when you say we're making a 4% cut in the fire department, some at home might say, oh, that's easy to make that cut. Well, it's not an easy cut to make because our budgets, whether it's the school department grappling with peaks and valleys in special ed, or the fire chief dealing with a rise in calls, the police chief dealing with a total different array of calls today than he was seeing even 3 years ago. I want people to understand that if they make this investment in the town, which I wholeheartedly hope they make, but if they make this investment in the town, that we're going to continue, all of the boards that are involved in this and our professional managers, of being really good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. This is not, we're not asking for $690,000 so we can make additions to departments. We're asking for $690,000 so we don't have to make cuts to departments. This is not a decision that any of us want to be in. I think a piece of the discussion that's been missing in this is that along the way, look at school funding that we get from the state. It has been at best level funded over the last 6 to 8 years. I just saw an amendment that passed today in the House of Representatives calling for a study of unfunded mandates that DESE and the federal government have been placing on the school department's operation, to the fact that one of the things I've seen is 3 new mandates a day have been placed on our school department. Is just a prelim look at that, 3 a day. And I can tell you that, and Steve, you agree with this, 3 a day, somebody's paying for that, and I'll tell you who's paying for it. It's been paid for within our budget. So if the voters look at this as they had in other investments that they make in this town, it's not going to be an investment with a new building and a new facility, but it's going to be an investment in the people that are in those buildings and those facilities, providing the level of service that, as a taxpayer and a resident of the town, that maybe I've become so accustomed to that you just assume it's always going to be there. And I think we've smartly structured this in such a way that we are giving us some capacity for future increases that are likely to come, whether it's in our regional school district or elsewhere, as Chief Twist's volume continues to rise. Chief DG and his department continue to deal with. A Public Works department that has less members than they had in the 70s. A rec program that I think gives kids in our town an opportunity to stay within their community during the summer than to be many of them sent to a program that's towns away. I think that's what the fabric of this town's about, and I hope that the voters in this town will take a long, hard look at this, ask the questions, whether it's of us on the board or our managers or the department heads that are willing to be part of that discussion, or our school department and our representatives on the school committee. Those are discussions that will have to be made, and I just hope that majority of the voters will, both at town meeting but also at the ballot, will realize that this investment, if not made, will have a pretty dramatic look. And you were absolutely right, Andy. These are not cuts that we're saying, hey, we may have to make. These are cuts that if the override fails are already made for us. Should the override fail, $60,000 is automatically coming out of the police department. Should the override fail, $155,000 is coming out of our elementary school. If the override fails, $65,000 is coming from Chief Twist and the members of his department. So I think that's a sobering message, but I mean, I have faith in the voters, but really the taxpayers that have been very generous this town in the past. For, folks like myself, I came to this town for a reason. For others, including some that sit on this board that were born and raised in this town, that continue to live here for a reason and have their families here. So I'll get off my soapbox, but I think this is a message that when people see that these cuts are real, it's not something that we've come up with arbitrary. We've spent a lot of time looking at, with our department heads and the professionals, of where we can be surgical with having the least amount of effect on the health, safety, education, and welfare of the community. And this is where we are.
We are lucky in this town that we have, employees that many of them live in town and therefore care about the town and about the services that they provide to the citizens. And, Brian is absolutely right. This is an investment in our people to keep them able to provide to us the service that we expect and that we love to get. So hopefully when people look at the facts, they will come to the conclusion that they will be able to support this override.
I want to thank you all for coming tonight and giving us your input on this. And we will, just continue to reach out to the community and spread the word and explain to everyone that we really need them to come out and vote both at town meeting and at the town election in support of this operating override. So thank you all very much for coming tonight.
Thanks, folks.
And for all your hard work, too. I appreciate it.